Good morning, everybody. I hope that you are all doing very, very well. I myself am just perfect. Life is good. So blessings to you and yours. So I've been watching a lot of videos and reading as much as I could find on Andrew McGann or James Andrew McGann or Drew McGann. These were all three names that he used at all three places of employment that we actually know about at this time. So there remains like this big conversation or speculation among the talking heads. You know, what could a motivation have been to kill these two parents? I'll just tell you, I think that if the mother had not gone back to check on her husband, I just don't think he would have. I think it would have ended with the dad, right? I think that whatever McGann did, I suspect, no, one possibility, let me say it this way. One possibility is that he did the dirty deed. The mom was able to get the two little girls, ran almost all the way to the parking lot, told the girls, run as fast and far as you can. Do not stop. No matter what you hear, run, which they did. And then they went into a ranger's station. There was a lady there that found them. And then the mom turned around and went back to see her husband. And in all fairness, he's Sundown Farms. In all fairness, I think, what would you have thought if you had been in the same situation? You would have taken your girls and run, just what she did. You would have gotten far away and maybe stood there a minute listening, maybe waiting to see, do I hear anything? Is there anybody following us? And I think it must have been quiet. I think she must have felt like the attack was over, because it would have to be something that would make it possible for a mom to leave the sides of her girls, right? If you could still hear violence, you wouldn't leave your children. You would stay with them, going to get them into safety. Every cell in our body screams, protect the young, right? Even if we're thinking in our head, no, I got to go back. I got to help my husband. It is something that is in our DNA to protect our young, no matter what. So I think she must have maybe stopped and listened if she didn't hear anything. And she thought, I need to go back and see if he's okay, or if he's lying there injured and I need to get him an ambulance. I need to see what is happening. And that's when she told the girls to run and not to stop and not to look back, just keep going. Now, what I'm unsure of is this. Did she head back and McGann was following her and she encountered him as she's trying to make her way to her husband? I think no. That was initially my thought. My initial thought was she turned around to go back to fight McGann because he was still following them. And the reason that I changed my mind about that is that both people, Mr. and Miss Brink, they were both found together. And apparently he took time to sort of hide them, to put them off to the side of the trail. So then I think maybe he was just sitting there. Maybe he was just sitting. It was over, and he was kind of like, "What did I do? You know, what happened here? How did this go so wrong?" And then when she showed up, then he was like, "I can't. She's a witness. I can't just let her go. If I have any hope of escaping this, I can't just let her be free." And so the act against her might have been self-preservation. At the end of the day, none of this really matters. The only thing that really matters is that, these two little girls, their parents were horribly murdered. And there was a moment of intense fear for all of them, for this entire family. I also wonder if there was just an altercation along the way. He did talk to people in his life about places like online. There's a couple of posts online where he's asking about good places to go hiking in North Texas. So was he maybe just out on the trail, and maybe he stopped to talk to the two girls, and the dad said, "You need to move along. You don't have any business talking to my little girls," which my husband would absolutely have said, "Are you crazy? A 28-year-old man stopping to talk too long with my two little girls?" No, he would never have allowed that. Never. So I would definitely understand that Brink might have done that somehow maybe McGann was inappropriate, based on what we've heard, about his school troubles. So, no, it really doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter exactly how it unfolded, other than this. If he's a predator and he was, maybe they all stopped at a gas station and McGann was there and saw the two little girls. And so he followed this family to see, where do they live? Where are they going? What are some places that I might be able to see them in the future? And then it was just opportunistic that they ended up at the park hiking and such. I wonder about that. There is a kind of an ongoing discussion, both on YouTube and Reddit, the other online sources, even the talking heads, the newspaper articles. There's a lot of speculation about, was this sexually, I'm horrified to use that word in relation to a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old. Not sexually motivated, because for someone that would look at a 7-year-old child like that, that's really about control and domination. It's really mental illness, correct? So I'm not using that meaning actual sex, but that he was a predator and he saw these two little girls as potential prey, and that's a much more accurate, the verbiage is much more accurate to call it prey than to say it's sexually motivated. It's not sex. But to look at them as prey, and that was kind of how it all kind of unfolded. So whether it was just an opportunistic moment where he took a little bit too long to stop and talk to these two little girls, and the dad said, "You need to get on out of here. You need to get away from my daughters." And he became angry. I suspect, with what we have learned about his history from parents of other students that McGann was teaching at the school, he had a lot of trouble. He had 3 years of teaching three different schools. The first school, he didn't even make it past, November, October, maybe. The second school, he got through the year, but they did not renew his contract. And so that's why he found himself in Arkansas, was for another contract, another teaching position. So the guy has a lot of trouble. He was turned in for inappropriate behavior all 3 years. So why wouldn't he be inappropriate with kids walking on a hike? I can definitely see where he might violate, those sacred boundaries, those social boundaries. So with the other thing that people are saying a lot about is that he passed all his background checks. I know I know that he passed all of his background checks, but how many crimes against children have we all talked about? And we have 5 or 6 people come out of the woodwork and say, I know this kid, and let me tell you a story. We just didn't really have that. Now with Brian Koberger, I think once he was arrested, I think it happened after he was arrested. There were people that came out and said he was my friend, or we were in class together, and he was kind of domineering in the conversation circles. He was arrogant. We did get those stories from just a handful of people, not very many people at all. But we didn't really have people come out and say, oh, well, no, I take that back. There was the bar owner. The bar owner did say that Brian Koberger was asked to leave because he was creeping on the women, and there were complaints about him being creepy. Yeah, that did happen. So, but it's just not very common that we get these people come out and say, oh yeah, I know about him, and here, let me tell you a story about him. But with this guy, it literally was within hours of him being identified. After the arrest, had his picture up, hours. And we started getting parents of little kids that had been in his class or in the school saying he's a creepy, scary person. I did look to see about other like elementary age kids, girls to be specific, like in Oklahoma, Dallas-Fort Worth, or north of Dallas-Fort Worth, Arkansas, in the past 5 years that may have gone missing, or like cold cases, right? There's a 1994 cold case out of Florida that was never solved. There's a 2004 of Rebecca Gould in Arkansas, but let's be honest, he would have been, 4 years old at the time. So it doesn't look like there's any other potential murders that he might have been connected to. In the case of Brian Koberger, I did find that one lady, college-age girl, looked exactly like Kaylee and Maddie. Blonde hair, free-spirited, very popular. I did find that case about 40 minutes away from where Brian Koberger lived, still unsolved to this day. And then there was another older woman that went missing right there in the town of Brian Koberger, that was eventually found murdered, and her case has not been solved. So there were kind of some of those potential connections, but in the case of this guy, at least restricting the search to Dallas, Fort Worth, North, Arkansas, and all of Oklahoma, no. But he could have traveled too, right? His dad had connections to Pennsylvania, which I thought was crazy. But look, a lot of people are from Pennsylvania. Not everybody is from Pennsylvania is a so then that leaves us, if there's not an established pattern of predatory behavior, although I certainly do think McGann, I think that people being aware and careful, kids being sophisticated and recognizing, hey, Mr. McGann's a weirdo, Mom. Let me tell you what he did with the girls in the class. I think that his attempts at maybe finding prey, I think that was interrupted. But there's two things that come to mind that I think about, and one of them is this. People that become predators of small children, it is common, almost expected. It's so common that you're surprised when history is not there, right? And that is that most of them were, in fact, victims of other sexual predators, or maybe severe physical abuse when they were young. That people that grow up to become predators, their psychosocial development is modified by these extraordinary events where they are the victim. And the victim of that childhood then turns around to become predator. Now, look, there's a lot of people that misstate statistics about this phenomenon. The truth is, the absolute grand majority of people who experienced abuse in childhood, they heal and they go on and have perfectly normal lives. Maybe they struggle with depression, maybe they have problems with anxiety, but they're not likely to go on and assault other people. In circumstances, though, where they have assaulted someone, when you look back into their history, then 9 times out of 10, there is assault. There was some level of victimization. I would even be willing to go out on a limb and say even some mostly extreme abuse. So if that's the case, then the question comes to, was this just a guy messed up in the head who was acting out what happened on him, right? Was it reaction formation? Or at 28 years old, was he dealing with some kind of psychosis? Is he having a level of mental health crisis? Maybe he has found it impossible to form connections with other people his age, and therefore being too familiar and friendly with the children was simply because nobody else in his life would accept him. He was just too odd or socially clumsy. That's another thing that we see in predators. Very often, predators are just simply socially incompetent. They just can't form relationships with people in their age group, and children become an easy outlet because they don't feel judged. They feel like they're the ones that are in control. They don't feel threatened by children. So when you get into the underpinnings of these crimes, it gets real murky and it gets really disheartening, right? It's easy when you say he's a predator, he hurt children, he murdered parents, throw away the key, done. He's gross. That's easy. It's easy to live in a black and white world where everything is cut and dry, all right, all wrong, middle ground. It's easy to see this cannot be accepted in a civilized society, and it can't. I think it makes people really uncomfortable when they start trying to understand what would drive you to do such a thing, what has happened to these people like Bryan Kohberger and Andrew McGann, what has happened to them that would lead them to this point in their life to do something that is so antisocial and so heinous, even crimes against God. And often it is because they themselves were victimized. One of the ways that predators are often caught is because their kid begins to act out on their peers, like a 9-year-old will act out on a 9-year-old or a 5-year-old, kind of like, well, I don't want to get into that. And then the parent says, oh my God, my child was assaulted by another child, neighbor down the road. And when the cops begin to investigate the predator 9-year-old, then that kid says, well, my dad is doing that to me, or my uncle is doing that, or my brother or my mom is doing that. and then that leads to then the big, where it all began, so to speak. I'm a little bit disturbed about a story coming out of England, like Leicester, where they had a camp for children, and they ended up with 8 kids that got sick. Now, the way the BBC is reporting this is they're saying that the kids were poisoned. That's what they're saying, poisoned. But if you read further into the story, you realize they say poisoned or some other noxious substance. And it turns out that it was, the kids were given a sedative. They didn't name the sedative, but it's like a benzodiazepine kind of medication. 76-year-old man. The kids were taken, they were going to this camp, right? And before they went to the camp, this big group of kids was taken to this pub to like have breakfast. They took like a couple of mile walk and then they went to this pub. Well, a 76-year-old man apparently put drugs into the food of these children. And once they got the kids to the camp, they all, of course, fell ill. And somehow they were able to track back to where the old man gave these kids the sedative. My question is, why? Why did you do that? The name of the pub or the inn where all this happened is called the Anchor Inn. It's in Plungar. And there were, they served burgers, chips, and drinks to 45 children. All the kids were like 10 years old. They had a 2-mile walk to get to the village. The meal was paid for by the pub. It was a charitable gesture. It was done by this is such a creepy story. It was done by the Stathern Lodge Fund. They've been doing it for 8 years. And the kids all fell ill. I'm imagining they couldn't be awakened or they were vomiting. The children were all taken to the village hall, and then parents were called. Parents were very angry, and it was a chaotic scene because the police would not let the parents close to the kids. They were keeping the parents away. Such a crazy story. So they set up a makeshift triage center, deciding which children needed to go to the hospital, which children could be released to their parents. A 28-year-old woman who lives near the hall said, we saw all these ambulances and police cars. All the kids were guarded. They would not let anyone near the children. Parents were stressed. They were very angry. They were there till 11 o'clock at night. I saw one girl with her dad. She had her toy with her. They were waiting around as if for another child. It was surreal. And it was odd because they wouldn't let the parents near the kids, but it was very quiet. Parents couldn't get any access to the kids. That was the weird thing. They'd just been told they weren't allowed in. It was mostly confusion from what I could tell. There were a lot of cars that were turning up. Leicestershire police said it received a report on Sunday of children feeling unwell, but it did not visit the camp until Monday and had referred itself to the independent office. See, that's another thing. These kids were drugged on Sunday. Why weren't the police called until Monday? And why were so many sick? This is really disturbing. The force said the investigation was being led by the East Midlands Special Operations Unit Major Incident Team. They confirmed that it was investigating an incident at the camp in Stathern, which is 8 miles north of Melton. The arrested man was detained on suspicion of administering poison or a noxious substance with intent to injure, aggrieve, or annoy. So they're saying that this 76-year-old dude gives tranquilizers to 8 or 9 children for what? And why were the kids poisoned on Sunday, but cops are not called on Monday? What kind of camp exactly was this? A spokesperson said, we sent a number of resources, including 4 paramedics and ambulance cars, 10 crewed ambulances, and responders from the air ambulance was also in attendance. They had 9 patients taken to Nottingham Medical Center. So the reason that I brought that up with this story about Andrew McGann is, to me, this sounds so suspicious. If you think about children being targeted, like related to Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or soccer camp, you have 25 kids or 45 kids at camp. They get sick on Sunday, but on Monday morning, you have them walk 2 miles to a bar in town. Then you call the cops? What? You didn't want them at your camp? What's going on out there at that camp? I think we have to be really careful about the people that our kids are being taught by. I did a story about a year ago about the school photographer. Do y'all remember that? The school photographer. Yeah. I think parents need to be very careful. Just because someone passes a background check, just because they hold a teaching certificate, maybe it's a circumstance where they just haven't gotten caught yet, like Andrew McGann. And I do think that it is critical at this point that our nation have some kind of nationwide database that when you have someone, a teacher or a coach, who's been asked to leave school after only 4 months of teaching because of inappropriate behavior towards the children, I think you have to, I think we have to have an avenue to report that, even though it did not go to law enforcement. Otherwise, what you're saying is that we don't get to safeguard our children unless one of our kids gets sacrificed to one of these creeps. There shouldn't have to be a sacrifice. If a situation is so egregious that somebody's being asked to leave the classroom after only 4 months, their first teaching experience, especially because they're letting little girls sit on their lap during class, we need a database. We do. There's not a normal person on the planet in this day and age, 2025, that says, oh yeah, totally normal to be a male teacher or even a female teacher and let a little 10-year-old sit on your lap. Totally normal. No one would say that. No one would believe that. No one. And I feel when I read the story about the Leicestershire camp, I said, there's funny business in the camp. There's something serious happening in the camp. And was the 76-year-old that they're obviously protecting, because they're not putting his name out, they're not giving you any information about the dude, was he working at the camp? Or was he director of the camp? If you live in England, if you live anywhere close to Leicestershire, please do some investigating for us. there's a story there. You don't give drugs to 9 different kids, 8 of them getting very ill, and there not be a story. You know what I mean? All right. Okay. So that, excuse my wet hair today. It's still drying. So I hope you guys are doing well, and I hope that you have something nice planned for Sunday. And we're going to continue to follow the case of, this creepy dude. And all I can say is thank God for strong parents, because I think that these 2 parents saved the lives of their 2 little girls. I believe that from the very bottom of my heart. I believe that. All right. I will be back. I'm not sure when. I hope that you will subscribe, so at least you'll get a notification that I have put something new up. Please hit the thumbs up, and you can share the video all you like. All right. Y'all have a good afternoon. Bye.
Late at night, when shadows creep, whispers echo where secrets sleep. I wander through these empty streets, searching for light where hope